My lightning talk is the State of the Onions address. Dun, 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 dun. Woo-hoo. Now, what in the world does that mean? Well, there's a lot of state of the such and such. There's the State of the Union address, the State of the Union address, the State of the Onions address, the State of the Scallion address, the State of the Velociraptor. There's a lot, and there's a lot. And almost all of those are just related to Perl things, if you can believe that. So, obviously, the President of the United States gives the State of the Union address, and that's kind of the original thing, I guess you might say, the original address. And then Larry Wall, the prestigious founder of Perl, Saint Larry as some might call him, as long as I put it in quotes and say, as some might call him, then I'm technically not saying that myself, and then people aren't going to bark at me for it. It was Brett. Brett was the one who was doing it. Has Larry Wall been canonized by the? Oh, he has to be dead before he. Okay, let's not wish that to happen too soon. Someday. Okay.
He did a few miracles.
Yes, he did. He did. Okay, so what we have is the State of the Onion address, singular, was the one originally created by Larry and all of his buddies, the other pumpkins that were in charge of Perl 4 and 5 and so forth. And the State of the Scallion address is my talk about specifically the Perl compiler, because the Perl compiler is a skinny version of the onion, so it's a scallion or a spring onion, green onion, some might call it. Wild scallions! Anyway, little Bill and Ted reference for you there. I actually have wild scallions that grow in my front yard, and we go and pick them every year and cut them up and eat them in the salad. They have a weird flavor, delicious wild flavor. Lots of wild things growing here in Texas. By the way, hot tip, anything in nature that smells or tastes like an onion or garlic or shallot sort of thing, it's pretty much that's what it is, and it's safe to eat. So if you're starving out there, Scoutmaster Brazzy says, if it smells like an onion or garlic, it probably is an onion or garlic. So go ahead. Just rub it on your lips and make sure you don't get a blister. And if not, then it's safe. And that kind of applies to most other things anyway. So then now the State of the Union address we gave last time. That's about artificial intelligence. And we'll be talking more about that tonight at our AI and Science Reception, 5 to 7 p.m. here in Austin. And then last but not least, there's the State of the Velociraptor. That's about the Perl 5 interpreter. And that was kind of I don't know if they're still trying to push that Velociraptor idea, but that was one of their logos for a while, with Matt Troughton, MST, and all them. And so then the State of the Onions, plural, which we're going to discuss now for a little bit. This is an overview of all of the different things related to Perl. So I need to share my screen. I need to first of all, okay, I need to go over to this one, yes, and then I need to open, oh wait, I'm already on the right, perlcommunity.org. Okay, good. So let's share the screen. Which one is it? There it goes. And then it's going to be this one. Okay, great. Is that showing up on yours? Just double check it, please. So, if we go to the, thank you, this little button called Raku, which, in case you didn't know, there was a failed attempt to create a non-compatible version of Perl called Perl 6, and again, non-compatible, meaning it really had nothing to do with the previous language. It was a huge, tremendous failure, and it had to be renamed to something that's not named Perl, so it's called Raku now. And the reason I bring this up is not because I'm trying to harp on Raku. They're not really considered part of Perl anymore. but because I was going to bring up this picture here that you can see, there's St. Larry, and let me zoom this in a little bit. Whoop, too much. Okay. So is that showing up? Yeah, okay. So you can see that on the left side over here with the camel, this is all the Perl part, and the right side, this is all the Raku part with this butterfly over here. So you can pretty much ignore the right side for today. The part with the butterfly, all the red arrows, you can ignore those for today because I'm not going to be talking about Raku since it's not part of Perl. But I will talk about the other parts over here to the left. So, state of the onions. Well, everyone that's interested and involved in Perl probably needs to understand what is Perl. I mean, that's a pretty basic thing to understand, and it's not exactly a straightforward answer. Perl is a computer language. We all kind of know that, kind of like Java or Python or Rust or Ruby, all these other ones, C++. These are all programming languages. So you can see at the very top the black arrows that is going into St. Larry's brain. These are all the other languages and programs that came before Perl. And this is important. This is the historic interest that we like. It's worth mentioning. Okay? Unix. This was from like 1971. This was pretty much came before everything else. And this was like we were talking about. Bell Labs. These were the, someone's dinging me. Ding, ding. Okay, these are, we're going to move on to our next topic in 10 minutes, but meanwhile, we're still going here. We had Unix, we had the Bourne shell, which is binsh, and that's what you type in when you're running commands in the Unix operating system, which is now a whole family of operating systems because the Unix code kind of got bought by a bunch of jerky people and it's problematic. It's still somewhat encumbered legally after all these years. Awk, who mentioned Awk earlier? Who had that Awk book? Let me see that Awk book. It's kind of awkward that I would have to hold up this Awk book, but I want you, so there's Awk right there, okay? He's got he has a little penguin on there, that's cute. I like that. I want to just see what year this is, because I'm curious. 88? Yeah. Where does it say that? I'm gonna trust you in here. Oh, 1988, there it is, yep. This book was typeset in Times Roman and Courier. And it even has, look at that, AT&T Bell Labs, 1988. Copyright by Bell Telephone Laboratories Incorporated. So Awk was another language that went into St. Larry's brain. C, that was the original general purpose programming language, okay? grep and awk and sed are kind of specialized tools or sub-languages, but C is a general purpose language, and all of those black arrows at the top up here, all these hovering about the top of his head, got combined down to Perl. And he also created Raku, and that's kind of the reason why this is an important graphic, because it shows that he did create both of these two different things, okay? Even though we don't really care about the red side of things. The reason why do we not care about Raku? Well, that's an extremely touchy question, because there's emotional aspects, political aspects, financial aspects, technical aspects, of course, and dare I say religious, there's, it's like VI or Emacs. Well, do you want to fight with bare knuckles, or do you want to fight with guns and knives? Because that's basically the only thing it's going to devolve into if people start arguing about their favorite text editors. And so we're not going to argue about Perl versus Raku, but what we will say is the reason why we're not interested in Raku is because, number one, it's not compatible with Perl. So, I mean, what's the point? It might as well be Python or Ruby or something. It's a different language. It's just not Perl. That's, I guess, I could stop there, but I'll go a step further, and I'll go one line deeper into the truth. And the truth is that we were kind of promised that it would be compatible, and because of that, the development of normal Perl stalled out for so long that it harmed our community irreparably. So, whether anyone wants to face the truth or not, I'm here as the inescapable hand of change and voice of truth, and the truth is that Raku is the thing that hurt Perl. So St. Larry both helped us and hurt us. And it was a double-edged sword, ultimately. It's a sad thing. It's a very sad thing. But now we have our Perl Community nonprofit organization, no Raku allowed. And that's not to be mean towards them. It's a reaction that we had to take because they took over the old Perl group. So now the old Perl group is called the Raku Foundation. And so, okay, well, they wanted to take over the old one, so we created a new one. It's not because we hate their guts necessarily, but because we just had no choice. We had to have some place we could actually do Perl, and it was no longer in the Raku Foundation. So we still have to acknowledge them as a sister language, even if some of us may consider it to be a bastardized, sister language. But they were both created by the same person, which is Larry Wall. Now, within the whole left side of the blue arrows, that's what we care about for the next few minutes to talk about, because these are the onions. And you don't even see an onion up there because the onion is a copyrighted and trademarked image by the Raku Foundation, so they can keep it and eat it for lunch and see how delicious that is. Just bite into it just like an apple and just watch the tears go down your cheeks. And that's, I wish them the best of luck with that onion luncheon that they're going to have with themselves. Meanwhile, there is another group of delicious and nutritious items related to Perl: pumpkins, vanillas, coffees, strawberries, and Roadrunners. Well, Roadrunners, I don't know. I guess you could eat a Roadrunner. Probably not a lot of meat on them. But it would be tough, whatever you get, because they're running. Now, and camels, I'm sure someone's had to eat a camel before, stranded out in the desert. Sorry, buddy, but it's your time to go. So, nevertheless, the main camel, the camel is also an annoyingly copyrighted or trademarked image by O'Reilly and Associates, who is reluctantly still grasping on somewhat to that legally, but it represents the entire language description, or it represents the language definition somehow. In other words, the camel is not a piece of software. It's really a book called the Camel Book, and that's supposed to be a description of the language, okay? Within that, you have the pumpkin, which is a piece of software. That's the main Perl interpreter that we all use, whether we like to or not. I prefer not to use it whenever I can avoid it, but it's hard to avoid. But that's pumpkin Perl is the main Perl. If you want to know what Perl is, it's called pumpkin Perl. And very few people use the term pumpkin Perl, but that is if you want to be specific about, like, you're talking about the Perl 5 interpreter, then you could call that pumpkin Perl. And it has been historically called pumpkin Perl, and it used to be that the people in charge of Perl 5 interpreter were called the Pump King, like pumpkin, but with a G on the end, so it's a portmanteau of pumpkin and king. And there does still exist in somebody's closet somewhere, either Ricardo or Neil Bowers maybe, or some other bad guys, I don't know, but there's a small stuffed pumpkin stuffed animal toy, plush toy that's existed since, I don't know, the 90s maybe? And it's the same physical object that's existed this whole time. And it's like a stuffed animal, but it's a little pumpkin. And that pumpkin is called the patch pumpkin, which is again like a play on words for pumpkin patch, right? Which is where pumpkins grow. And of course, and another thing, what does anybody raise your hand if you know what St. Larry created before Perl that's still used and important? Yes. Patch.
And then the newsreader.
Oh, well, that's true. Is that still actively used? I don't know. Well, patch is patch is used a bazillion times a day by everybody in the whole world, but usually buried under a bunch of stuff automatically, I think, nowadays. Not a lot of people I try not to apply patches manually if I can avoid it, right? But patch is the program for the whole world that allows you to do version control or revision control, whatever they call it nowadays. In other words, controlling the different versions of text files, primarily source code text files. And, oops, someone's trying to get it. You have to run patch in order to split apart and remerge different versions of source code files.
Yeah, Git generates them.
And Git automatically Git is basically built on top of patch, is the simple way of putting it, okay? So, and everything's built on top of Git. Everybody's software stuff, if you're not on Git, then you're not a programmer yet, or you're just a newbie. So that's like GitLab and the erstwhile GitHub that's now owned by Microsoft, and we try to get away from that. But there's also Bitbucket, and you can run your own Git servers, and Git is open source, GIT. So the patch pumpkin was the physical plush doll that was given to whoever was in charge of Perl. And it was like a gift that each guy would give to the next guy or gal, whoever was the pumpkin. The pumpkin was defined by whoever held the patch pumpkin. There was no crown, but there was a plush doll. And I've seen this doll. I know that it exists. It's somewhat mythical, but it's a real thing. It's kind of like the mug that John Orwant threw and smashed against the wall because he was so mad about Perl 5 and 6 not being compatible or whatever. And did that mug ever exist? Was there ever a smashing? Was it real? I think it was, but I mean, it's a somewhat mythical thing. So anyway, there's no longer pumpkins. They have a 3-person triumvirate that's now called the Perl Steering Council. PSC, and there's basically a 3-man pumpkin group made up of past pumpkins. So Pumpkin Perl is the main interpreter starting from 1987. It's a what? It's the Orange Man group. There's also other versions and editions and variations of Perl, and I will briefly mention them all right now. Vanilla Perl and Strawberry Perl are for Windows. Vanilla Perl was short-lived, but Strawberry Perl is still the primary version of Perl for Windows. So if you're going to run Windows, you should probably run Strawberry Perl. There's also Active Perl. So that is another version of Perl for Windows. It's a commercially supported version of Perl for Windows. And there may be companies that provide commercial support for Strawberry Perl, and there may be a non-supported version of Active Perl, but I'm just in general telling you that those are the sort of the open source and closed source versions of Perl for Windows. You may be asking yourself, how could there be different versions of Perl? These are recompiled and repackaged versions of the main Pumpkin Perl interpreter. That's why you see the arrows all going out of Pumpkin Perl. Okay, because you can't rewrite the interpreter, really, or at least in the past you haven't been able to. We're working on it as part of our big grand scheme of things, but it's never been possible before. So everything was just a repackaging or forking of Pumpkin Perl. There was an attempt to completely rewrite Perl called Pony that never worked right. That was Nicholas Clark, a past pumpkin, and some other various.
Top of Parrot.
It was supposed to be built on top of Parrot, which you can see over on the other side over there. And neither of them ever worked correctly, which was a huge blow. In fact, for about 3 or 5 years, not 5, for about 3 years, people in the know we thought that Pony and Parrot were going to just be the absolute future of Perl and wipe away everything else permanently. No more interpreter, no more Perl 5 versus Perl 6. We'd have one virtual machine called Parrot that somehow magically could run 2 languages. And that was the flaw, because the flaw is you cannot have one virtual machine that efficiently and correctly runs more than one language, unfortunately. It's not practically or feasibly. Now, you do have things like the .NET Common Language Runtime, which crappily runs a bunch of languages. And maybe runs one okay, like C# I think is what it was originally built for, maybe. Anyway, I am super not a Microsoft user or expert at all. I did enjoy Windows 98 for the first 6 months of 1998, and that was my last time that I used Microsoft, just FYI. So, moving on, Pony never worked. It got put out to pasture. We will probably bring it back, though. Pony will probably be revived once I have my AI finished, and that will be a whole other story. Perlito is an attempt to run Perl using JavaScript, which is, again, you can get like 90% of Perl running pretty dang decent and 10% running so bad that you might as well not even bother, because you're trying to use a JavaScript virtual machine to run a non-JavaScript language, which we happen to call Perl. Again, sorry, it seemed like a good idea at the time because this was all when we didn't know. I mean, this is all, new science. People didn't know that you couldn't really create one virtual machine for multiple languages. It hadn't been done before. It seemed like a good idea to everybody, to all of us smart people. It seemed like a good idea. And guess what? It was a terrible idea. It was a huge fail. It was the biggest Perl 6, and I'm just going to say this, I've said it before, is the biggest failure in all of computer science so far. Because Perl 6 was supposed to be a 100-year language, a language that was built by the smartest language guy, Larry Wall, based off of what was the smartest language at the time, Perl 5, as we now are forced to continue calling it, and was supposed to, you want to know what was so magical about Perl 6, okay, was that language grammars were first-class citizens of the language. In other words, and this is where it just becomes insane. Not only can you program other languages directly into Perl 6, but you can change Perl 6's own grammar at runtime, which means that the Perl 6 itself doesn't even really have a real solid grammar, and so the whole language is basically like quicksand. There's nothing solid to stand on, I guess, in the end, because even the language itself is constantly just changing itself. And it turned out to be so incredibly complex to build a virtual machine that could do that, that they went through a whole slew of them. You can see all the failed virtual machines on the right side of the diagram that I'm not even going to spend one friggin' breath naming any of them. You can read them in your own brain. Failure after failure after failure after failure after failure of virtual machines to try and run this insane language that is actually not even a language. It's a meta language that is really supposed to describe itself and any other language. And we thought this was going to be like we were going to be the Borg, and we were going to assimilate every other language. That's what we thought when this was all happening. It's like, well, Don't worry about Python. They're just going to be swept right. Don't worry about Ruby overtaking. Don't worry, it's fine. We're going to just hoover them all up in our vacuum cleaner, and they'll all get added as Perl 6 grammars. Everybody else will be relegated. We will diminish every other language to the status of nothing but a Perl 6 grammar. That was the magical promise that we were sold. London Bridge is falling down. We were given a pie in the sky promise that was just technically so non-feasible that it was essentially never came to pass. Never came to pass. Did people try and implement other grammar languages in Perl 6? Sure. Did they ever get it to work right? No. Did they try and make Perl 5 and Perl 6 work together? Sure. You can see all the things that are pulling towards each other. Did any of those ever work right? Nope. Total failure, 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 failure. The only thing that ever still works anymore is Perl. Everything else is just essentially garbage, which I mean is kind of depressing if you think of like all that wasted time, but it's also kind of like, well, we're still here. We're still alive. Perl, the interpreter, actually still works. And I am going to mention I got to mention cPerl, and then I'll mention Perl, A New Hope, episode 4. Okay, so, and I'm not really a warhead, but...
which was made first.
Yes, episode 4, parentheses 1. cPerl, Rainy Urban, a very good friend of mine, also hated by the Perl community because he had the gall to fork the Perl interpreter. He was actually the only person smart enough to fork the Perl interpreter, and boy, they can't put up with people smarter than them. Especially
The German.
I was going to say Austrian to be more accurate. Especially a highly opinionated genius Austrian who will tell you exactly what he thinks of your technical ideas and then walk the heck away. God bless Rainey. I love him. And Miriam is a lovely and beautiful wife. So, anyway, he forked Perl at cPanel, for cPanel, and that's kind of where the C came from. He said it stands for corporate Perl. Okay. Anyway, cPerl is basically all of Rainey's patches that got denied by the jerky bad guys.
That cPanel used though.
That cPanel still was using or is using, and they then he had like 250 patches or something. I don't even know, but it was a ton, more than like anyone in the history of Perl. That's why he was able to fork his own version of Perl, okay? So again, he didn't rewrite the interpreter. You can't really rewrite the interpreter, not by humans, not by hand at least, okay? We're gonna, again, work on that with the AI or maybe have a pony type thing, which I'll mention in just a moment. But Rainey definitely deserves honorable mention for cPerl. And Rainey, Ingy, and I are the ones that created Perl 11 back in 2012, trying to merge Perl 5 and 6 back together again. And that's, of course, come to a dead end as well now that Perl 6s no longer exist. So, what does exist and what do we care about in the future? Not really cPerl unless you're at cPanel. Not really active Perl or strawberry Perl or pumpkin Perl, because those are all interpreters, although they are important for the time being because they're the only thing we have that's good and working, but they're not the way of the future. And by the way, I know that I'm taking up 10 minutes of the next talk. I apologize, but I'm almost done, guys. I'm almost done, I promise. Please stand by. So, what are the things that we need in the future? Well, we do need a pony type thing, okay? Although it's probably not going to be called pony. And we do need something that's more than just an interpreter. So if you go over to the committees page, you can see that there's a Perl types committee. And at the very basis of everything. There's a type system, and we're not going to even bother talking about it right now, but in case you didn't know, if you don't got data types, you don't got much in life. And unfortunately, the Perl interpreter never allowed us to have that, so that's why we had to build it. On top of that, I went ahead and wrote the Perl compiler. That's right, I'm famous, that's why I'm the president of the Perl community, blah, blah, blah. I'm the big genius who wrote the compiler. Yeah, whoop-de-doo. So it's still a work in progress. It's gonna be a work in progress still for a long time, but it is still making progress. And the good news is that when you compile your Perl code, it can run up to 400 or 500 times faster. That's like 40,000% of the speed. And then on top of that, we're eventually going to need to build a new virtual machine, okay? And why does that matter? Well, this is basically, this young lady here who's a real camel racer, this is a real thing they do, and this happens to be in Australia. You could think of this as Pony. Perl on new internal engine, Pony, but it's the camel version of Pony. It's a dynamic virtual machine for Perl. And we need to use the Perl compiler to write the new Perl VM, because the Perl compiler is the only thing that's super high speed and compatible with all the Perl data types. So I will openly admit to copying some of the ideas and homework from Perl 6, which was actually the only good thing that ever came out of Perl 6 was a bunch of good ideas that we were able to reverse engineer back into Perl 5.
Apocalypses.
That's right. St. Larry wrote a whole bunch of ideas down, and some of them were stupid and some of them were genius. So having a data type system, and then having a subset of the language, and then having a virtual machine on top of that, believe it or not, is in general the way that Perl 6 was designed. So there's a thing called NQP, not quite Perl, and there's a set of basic data types that uses, and then that's used to build a thing called MOAR virtual machine, more VM on top of that, and then that's what's actually used to run Perl 6. So it's basically me copying their ideas, but without any of their garbage code. It's all being done from scratch using Perl instead of Raku. I mean, we can't really copy their code anyway because it's all just Raku garbage. So that's the way of the future for Perl, okay, is the data type system, then on top of that, the compiler, then on top of that, the virtual machine, and when we have all of those things, we will no longer need to have the Pumpkin Perl interpreter at all, because all of the code that was previously interpreted will be able to be run in the new virtual machine. Amen. So, with that, I say thank you, and I'm sorry for going over time, but I will go ahead and unshare my screen, stop presenting,